We don't want to believe in the supernatural, but coincidences like these make us wonder. Even if some of them are just random chance, they're still freaky.
Farrah Fawcett rose to fame during her run as one-third of Charlie's Angels, and just so happens to be the subject of the best-selling pinup poster of all time. Unfortunately, at age 62, Fawcett succumbed to a rare form of cancer in a Santa Monica hospital on June 25, 2009. However, news of her passing was quickly overshadowed in the media by Michael Jackson, who died later that same day due to an overdose of medications administered by his own doctor. The King of Pop rose to fame with his brothers in the Jackson 5 before moonwalking his way to global stardom as a solo artist and creating unforgettable hits such as Thriller and Billie Jean. Jackson's doctor, Conrad Murray, was charged with involuntary manslaughter in February 2010 and served 2 years in prison for his role in the star's untimely death. Italian film director Federico Fellini was famous for pushing the boundaries of what film could say and do. Described by Time magazine as brilliant and mad, Fellini's films are well known for their imaginative, sometimes shocking content. The director was 73 when he passed away from cardiac arrest on Halloween in 1993. Though internationally renowned, Fellini's death was overshadowed in the States by the untimely passing of River Phoenix, who died of a drug overdose the same day. A teen idol in the 80s and early 90s, Phoenix made his name in films like Stand By Me and Running on Empty. Contrary to his clean image, however, Phoenix was living a secret, drug-fueled life. On Halloween night 1993, Phoenix began having seizures outside the Viper Room in LA, ultimately dying due to a lethal mixture of morphine and cocaine. Few frontmen have made an impact as significant as Freddie Mercury. From his incredible stage presence to his remarkable vocal range, Mercury and his bandmates in Queen are recognized as some of the greatest performers in rock and roll history. While he was a powerhouse on stage, Mercury was a famously private individual, so when rumors began circulating in the 1980s about his declining health, Mercury chose not to address them. It wasn't until November of 1991 that the famous frontman released a statement acknowledging he had been diagnosed as HIV positive and had developed AIDS. Only a day later, on November 24th, Mercury passed away at his home. Across the ocean, Kiss drummer Eric Carr had fallen ill in early 1991. He was diagnosed with heart cancer, according to the LA Times, and despite undergoing both surgery and chemotherapy, passed away on November 24th, 1991. Carr had replaced drummer Peter Criss in 1980 and stayed with Kiss for 11 years, recording 8 albums. He was only 41 when he passed. Though Mahatma Gandhi and Orville Wright had almost nothing in common, both men left a lasting influence throughout the world. Along with his brother Wilbur, Orville Wright is credited with essentially creating modern aviation. The Wright brothers' historic 1903 flight was the first instance of a controlled, sustained flight in a powered, heavier-than-air vehicle, a breakthrough that paved the way for air travel as we know it today. However, Orville Wright never experienced the joys of flying first class, as the 79-year-old passed away on January 30th, 1948. Gandhi, meanwhile, inspired civil rights around the world through his peaceful acts of civil disobedience. Known for his passive resistance approach to political dissent, Gandhi spent his life fighting against oppression, seeking India's independence from Britain, and promoting peace between Muslims and Hindus. Unfortunately, on January 30th, 1948, the 78-year-old leader was assassinated while on his way to a prayer meeting. Margaret Thatcher was the longest-serving Prime Minister of England in the 20th century, with a tenure surpassing 11 years. That's a decent run at any job, let alone running an entire country. Thatcher is widely considered Britain's most important politician in the post-war era, though her legacy is internationally known. In 2011, Meryl Streep won an Oscar for her portrayal of Thatcher in the 2011 film based on her life, The Iron Lady. Thatcher, who had dementia, never saw the film before suffering a stroke and passing away on April 8, 2013. The former prime minister was 87 years old. Across the ocean, American actress Annette Funicello passed away the same day as Thatcher due to multiple sclerosis-related complications. Funicello had been a staple of American pop culture since appearing in the Mickey Mouse Club as a teenager, but the actress was perhaps best known for starring in the Beach Party film series of the 1960s. Funicello was 70 at the time of her death. While John Adams and Thomas Jefferson are known in American history for their work on the Declaration of Independence, not many people know of the more eerie connection these founding fathers share. The second and third presidents, respectively, Adams and Jefferson's friendship decayed into a bitter rivalry for a time due to opposing political viewpoints. However, the two were able to rekindle their friendship once neither was in charge of the country, and remained close until dying within hours of one another on July 4, 1826, exactly 50 years after signing the Declaration of Independence. independence. Talk about a freaky coincidence. Legend has it that the last sentence the 90-year-old Adams muttered before he died was "Thomas Jefferson still survives." While there's little proof of that, Adams would have been wrong anyway. Jefferson died 5 hours prior to Adams's death. When two relatively young people died only months apart in the same house, people naturally assumed something weird must be going on. But no one has ever been able to prove that the deaths of actress Brittany Murphy at 32 and her husband Simon Monjack 5 months later at 40 were anything other than common illnesses. When Murphy died suddenly in her house in 2009, rumors swirled that it was because of anorexia or illegal drugs. But when the autopsy came back, it showed she died of acute pneumonia and severe anemia, and while there were drugs in her body, they were all over-the-counter meds. Monjack said she had been suffering flu-like symptoms and was tired before she died, but that was all. Monjack had a heart condition and was overweight, but when he suddenly died 5 months after Murphy in the same house, it was also to pneumonia and anemia just like his wife. But some don't believe this was a simple coincidence. There have been theories that their house was full of toxic mold, or that metal present in Murphy's hair meant she was poisoned, or that her mother killed them both. As it stands now, though, there is no conclusive evidence for any of this. The similarities between the deaths of Edward Kennedy and John McCain, two political heavyweights, were impossible to ignore. When McCain announced he was ill, the New York Times even ran an article titled "Eerie Parallels Between John McCain and Edward Kennedy." Both were diagnosed with the same relatively rare and aggressive form of brain cancer while in the middle of major healthcare debates in the Senate. Both lived just over a year after being diagnosed, and both died on the same day, August 25th, 9 years apart. Kennedy announced he had glioblastoma in 2008. He disappeared from the Senate while he had treatment but returned for a key Medicare vote. When he died 15 months later at age 77, McCain gave a eulogy at his memorial service. Even though they sat on different sides of the aisle in Congress, they were good friends. McCain received his own diagnosis of glioblastoma in 2017. He voted against repealing Obamacare days after he announced his diagnosis. He also left the Senate for a while to receive treatment, but he still died 13 months after being diagnosed in 2018 at age 81.
But Ted and I shared the sentiment that a fight not joined was a fight not enjoyed.
Natalie Wood's passing is one of the most infamous unexplained deaths in Hollywood history. That's why it's absolutely bizarre that just over 4 years later, another beautiful actress met an eerily similar fate. Both Wood and Carol Wayne, famous for appearing in sketches on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, mysteriously drowned in the Pacific Ocean after arguments with their significant others. Over Thanksgiving weekend in 1981, Wood was on a yacht off the coast of California with her husband Robert Wagner, as well as Christopher Walken and the boat's captain. She was found dead at age 43 in the water on November 29th, which was odd since she was famously afraid of the ocean. The captain swore he saw a fight between Wood and Wagner the night before she was found. Despite this, and the bruises on Wood's body, her death was ruled accidental. In January 1985, Carol Wayne was vacationing with friends and her boyfriend Edward Durston on the Pacific coast of Mexico. She was later found floating dead in the ocean. Like Wood, she was afraid of water and couldn't swim. It was reported that the last time Wayne was seen alive, she and Durston were having a massive argument. Suspicions were raised, but her death was also ruled accidental. She was just 42. Comedians metaphorically die on stage all the time, but it's rare that their lives literally end there, which makes the deaths of Tommy Cooper and Ian Cognito all the weirder. Both British funny men suffered heart attacks in front of live audiences, almost 35 years to the day apart. And since comedians often do strange things in their acts, neither audience thought anything was wrong at the time. Cooper was performing on the hit TV program Live from Her Majesty's on April 15, 1984. Millions tuned in to watch. Cooper was in the middle of his routine when he suddenly dropped to his knees. Since he was known for slapstick and improv, no one, not even the people backstage, thought anything bad had happened. The audience kept laughing. Eventually, the presenter figured out it wasn't a joke and called for a commercial break. Cooper was taken to the hospital where he was declared dead. On April 11, 2019, Ian Cognito was performing a stand-up set in England. He was also known for his flamboyant performances, and he had made a joke about having a heart attack or stroke only minutes earlier. When he sat down, put his head back, and started twitching, it seemed like just a funny callback. Once again, the audience laughed as the comedian died of a heart attack. After a few minutes, someone finally called an ambulance, but Cognito was gone. On December 31, 1997, Michael L. Kennedy, the son of political giant Robert F. Kennedy, died after colliding with a tree while skiing with his family. Less than a week later, almost the exact same thing happened to politician and musician Sonny Bono. Both men had crazy youths of excess and fame, and both became more serious once they got older, and then they both met their end the same way. Kennedy was in Aspen, Colorado with his extended family when the tragedy happened. In hindsight, it seems obvious someone was going to get hurt. The Kennedy family had apparently been playing football on skis for generations. While Michael was an extremely talented skier, that afternoon he lost control and crashed into a tree, resulting in major head injuries. Attempts to stabilize him failed, and he was pronounced dead at a hospital about 90 minutes later. 6 days later, Congressman Bono was skiing with his own family in California. He left in the afternoon to go ski alone, and when he didn't come back that evening, his family reported him missing. The ski patrol found Bono in a wooded area. He, too, had collided into a tree sometime in the afternoon, resulting in massive head injuries that killed him. Actors Teresa Graves, Dennis Patrick, and Royce Applegate might not be household names, but they all found a decent amount of fame around the same era. Their careers even overlapped, with Graves and Patrick both appearing in episodes of The Rookies, while Patrick and Applegate both showed up on Dallas, The Streets of San Francisco, and The Mod Squad. Unfortunately, their deaths in house fires in Los Angeles also overlapped over the same 12-week period. On October 10, 2002, Teresa Graves, who starred on the 70s show Get Christy Love, was alone in her house when a faulty space heater started a fire that caused major damage. She was found unconscious but couldn't be revived at the hospital. She was 54. Just 3 days later, 84-year-old Dennis Patrick was home with his dog when a fire started. Sadly, both he and the dog died and were found next to each other after firefighters doused the flames. Royce Applegate appeared in dozens of TV shows and films over his career, but on January 1, 2003, less than 3 months after Graves and Patrick passed, his LA home caught fire. He was found dead at the age of 63. While heroin overdoses are not unheard of in celebrity circles, the similarities in the deaths of comedian Lenny Bruce and actors Robert Pastorelli and Philip Seymour Hoffman make them even more depressing. All three men died in their 40s, but Bruce was the youngest. The counterculture comedian was arrested numerous times, including for drug possession. In 1966, he was found dead on his bathroom floor of a heroin overdose, the needle still sticking out of his arm. He was just 40. Pastorelli was most famous for starring on the CBS sitcom Murphy Brown. He battled a heroin addiction and was being investigated for his girlfriend's death when he died. But his death was ruled accidental when he overdosed in 2004. He was found dead on the floor of his bathroom with a needle in his arm at the age of 49. Hoffman was one of the greatest actors of his generation, and while he had battled drug addiction in his youth, he'd been sober 23 years by 2012. But that year, he fell off the wagon. The following year, he went into rehab. Sadly, it wasn't enough. In 2014, he too was found dead on his bathroom floor of an overdose with a needle still in his arm. He was 46.
There's things I want to do. There's things I want to do, and I'm not going to do them if I keep doing this.
John Gregory Dunn was a journalist, screenwriter, and novelist happily married to the author Joan Didion, with whom he had one daughter. Michael Whitney was an actor unhappily married to the much more famous model Twiggy, with whom he too had one daughter. And while their deaths happened almost exactly 20 years apart, they had some odd similarities. Whitney was already estranged from his wife of 6 years when he sat down to dinner with his young daughter at a restaurant in New York City on November 30th, 1983. But he didn't get to enjoy the meal as he suffered a massive heart attack. He was rushed to a hospital, but doctors failed to revive him. Twiggy was on stage in a play at the time and wasn't told of her husband's passing until the show ended. Dunn was also sitting down to dinner with family in New York City, this time with his wife at their home when he died on December 30th, 2003. He also died of a massive heart attack before he could enjoy his last meal with his loved ones. Parallels in natural deaths are one thing, but similarities in murder are even more disturbing. Actor Phil Hartman and NFL star Steve McNair were both shot in their sleep by women with substance abuse issues with whom they had deteriorating romantic relationships, and both women then killed themselves. Hartman found fame on Saturday Night Live and then branched out successfully into other TV shows and movies. But his marriage was tumultuous, and his wife Bryn had issues with cocaine and alcohol. On the night that he died, he and Bryn had an argument over her drug use. Then Hartman went to bed. At some point, Bryn got out one of their guns and shot her sleeping husband 3 times in the head and chest. She got drunk, made some phone calls, drove to a friend's house, and then went back home to see what she'd done. The police showed up. Eventually, Bryn locked herself in the bathroom and took her own life. McNair was married but had a girlfriend on the side. His lover, Sahel Kazemi, knew he was cheating on her with even more women, so she cheated on him back. 2 days before she killed him, she got a DUI. Knowing their relationship was unraveling, she bought a gun, and as he slept on his couch in 2009, she shot him 4 times in the head and chest. She then turned the gun on herself.
When movies and TV shows rely on a blatant coincidence to drive the story forward, you can't help but groan. But sometimes, real life lines up in a way that feels like a setup by a bad writer. The only difference is, when coincidences like this happen in the real world, the results are nothing short of creepy. Edgar Allan Poe wrote a ton of short stories, but his only completed full-length novel is the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. It's about a ship where everyone mutinies before a storm leaves some of the mutineers adrift at sea. In the end, they eat a guy named Richard Parker.
I'd rather eat Hodges. Oh well, all right. No, I still prefer to eat Johnson. And we should all stop bickering and eat meat.
Poe's novel was published in 1838, and in 1884, 46 years later, a real ship called the Mignonette went through nearly the same thing, minus the mutiny. The yacht was hit by storms off the coast of Africa, leaving 4 men adrift in a dinghy with no food or water. Eventually, 3 of them killed and ate the 4th guy. That's just a tragic coincidence, but the creepiest detail of all was their victim's name, Richard Parker, just like in Poe's story. In the early 20th century, the White Star Line was one of the premier shipbuilders, and 3 of their biggest and best were the Olympic, Titanic, and Britannic, all of which met disaster. And one woman named Violet Jessup was on board all 3 of them. In 1911, Jessup was working as a nurse on the Olympic when it collided with the HMS Hawke. The Olympic didn't sink, so Jessup took a new job on the Titanic, and we all know how that turned out.
I'm the king of the world!
Amazingly, Jessup survived the disaster, at which point you'd probably guess that she was done with the ocean for good. But Jessup went right back to the sea on White Star's Britannic, which was drafted as a hospital ship during World War I. That ship hit a mine, and Jessup found her way into a lifeboat for the 3rd major ship disaster of her life. But Jessup wasn't the only weird story to come from the Titanic. In 1898, an author named Morgan Robertson wrote a book called The Wreck of the Titan, which was about an unsinkable ocean liner that hits an iceberg. Sound familiar? It gets better. Robertson's fictional ship was called the Titan. It was described almost exactly like the Titanic, and most of the people aboard died because there weren't enough lifeboats. And the strangest detail of all, the book was published 14 years before the Titanic's maiden voyage. Eerie. In 2002, 2 70-year-old twin brothers died 2 hours apart. But that's not even the strange part. The first brother was riding his bike on a roadway north of Helsinki when he was hit by a truck and killed. Before the family was even informed of his death, the second brother also died. He was riding his bike on the same road less than a mile apart when he was also hit by a truck and killed. One of the police officers involved in the cases said, "This is simply an historic coincidence. Although the road is a busy one, accidents don't occur every day." It made my hair stand on end when I heard the 2 were brothers, and identical twins at that. It came to mind that perhaps someone from upstairs had a say in this. In June 2007, news broke about the tragic murder-suicide involving pro wrestler Chris Benoit and his wife and son. But 14 hours before their bodies were discovered by police, Benoit's Wikipedia page was updated to say that he'd been having difficulties because of personal issues stemming from the death of his wife Nancy. The IP address where the changes originated was traced to Stamford, Connecticut, which is, coincidentally, where the WWE headquarters are located. In the end, the person who edited Benoit's Wikipedia page posted an apology, saying that the entire thing was just a major coincidence and not the result of first-hand knowledge or a psychic gift. Halley's Comet passes Earth once every 75 years or so. In 1835, Mark Twain was born 2 weeks after the comet passed overhead, and he felt a special kinship with it. 75 years later, Halley's Comet was getting ready to come around again when Twain reflected, "I came in with Halley's Comet in 1835. It is coming again next year, and I expect to go out with it." And that's exactly what happened. Twain died on April 21, 1910, just as the comet passed overhead. In case you slept through history class, here's a quick recap. One of the major events that kicked off World War I was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. It's an event that's become so mythic that it spawned a number of weird legends, like the idea that in 1913 he hunted down a white stag and was targeted by a mortal curse as a result. We're not really sure about that one, but there is one strange coincidence that's absolutely true, and it concerns his car. The Graf and Stift double Phaeton wasn't the cursed car of doom it was rumored to be, but it did bear an odd message. The car sat in a museum in Vienna for almost 2 decades before a British tourist pointed out the odd significance of the vehicle's license plate, which reads A111118, as in Armistice, November 11, 1918, the famous date of the agreement that ended World War I. The attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941 changed the course of World War II. Global tensions were already high, so it's terrifying to think that someone inside the United States may have not only known the attack was going to happen, but may have been passing information to the public in the weirdest way possible. On November 22, 1941, The New Yorker ran a few ads for a dice game called The Deadly Double. And because advertising is a product of the times, the ad showed the game being played by people hiding in an air raid shelter. It wasn't until after the attack on Pearl Harbor, 2 weeks later, that people started noticing what numbers were showing on the ad's dice, including one ad with dice that showed 12 and 7, which seemed like it could be referring to the date of the attack on December 7th. Other similar ads piqued the interest of the military intelligence, but it all turned out to be a weird coincidence. The theory that these ads had advanced knowledge of the attack was so widespread that the New York Times even ran a piece on the game's creator to debunk it and declared it a case of people's imaginations getting the better of them. Life is one of the most iconic magazines of the 20th century, and its pages have featured countless defining moments, starting with its very first issue on November 23, 1936. On the inside, the very first photo is of a baby being cradled in a doctor's hands. That baby was George Story, and the caption reads, "Life begins." Story went on to become a journalist, but that's not the big coincidence here. On April 4, 2000, Life announced it was ceasing publication. With the end of Life magazine also came the end of Story's life. He passed away a month later of heart failure at the age of 63.